I saw the trailer for this a few months ago, and I'd heard something here and there about its production, but I still didn't believe it was real until the moment I sat down, purchased it, and watched it. I mean, if you really want to experience this story, the best way will always be to just read the comic, but I'm always down for a stylized adaptation. However, does this new animated version justify being made?
Nope.
Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and while I undeniably had some fun with this, it was a complete waste of time for me and the people who made it. I've always been a fan of the Watchmen story and continuously find new layers behind Alan Moore's chaotically strange writing, and I also love the HBO miniseries sequel and even enjoy Zack Snyder's movie. And that all started because at a young age, my dad showed me his comic book collection and said that I could read any of them except for two, The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. So naturally, those were the first that I read. I didn't quite understand them, and my dad was right, they were not appropriate for a child, but Watchmen has been a story that I find strangely nostalgic. So just like that bottle of nostalgia everyone in this world is presumably chasing, I'm always chasing that nostalgia that Watchmen gives me. So when I started the movie, the first thing that I noticed was just how much I really didn't like the animation style. I settled into it pretty quick, and the way the artists implemented and used shadows, shading, and motion in general was phenomenal at times. And at very rare moments, depicts a sequence that does make me think this movie might have been justified in its creation. This being a closer adaptation of the comics was nice, but it's mostly depicted word for word, and I was not a fan of that. But more on that later. To be fair, this is only a part 1, we still haven't seen the rest of this story, but if it's more of the same, I don't know if I'm gonna watch part 2. I mean, I definitely will, because I watch everything, but I don't really want to. So if you're one of the few people who hasn't read or seen Watchmen, check out part 1 of this recent animated movie and let me know what you think of it, because for everyone else, I doubt it's worth your time or money. But now, it's time to talk spoilers, and that includes the whole comic, so I can finally stop being vague and actually dive into my real issues with why this movie didn't need to exist in the first place. If anything, this made me appreciate Zack Snyder's movie more, because he at least did something with the story. I've always thought that Snyder's movie was missing a big, colorful squid, because if one is in the comics, why wouldn't you put something like that in the movie? But within the context of that specific story, what they did does make sense. It would take a while to introduce the island full of scientists and artists creating the squid, and simplifies a lot of it to make it a Dr. Manhattan bomb instead. But man, that would have been cool to see, though we did eventually get it in the show, so maybe that's why I've grown to be fine with it. And in the animated version, I liked the first scene where they followed the comic and cut back and forth between the cops talking about what happened and what actually happened to the comedian. But it was right after that scene that I had the thought, are they just doing the comic? From then on, I was just comparing every facet of it to the graphic novel, which is usually unfair. But for this, there's nothing else to do as you watch but compare it. I did like how they brought in the Black Freighter pirate story, putting the dialogue on the comic-looking folded paper on top of the animation, but that was one of only 2 inventive sequences in the whole movie, and that lasted for maybe 15 seconds. They brought it back once, but it wasn't done nearly as well, and it just made me sad. Dr. Manhattan's speech was the other genuinely great moment, with his voiceover overlapping, and the visuals were great to see at first, because right after that, they just showed him looking at the events, and that was significantly less interesting to see. Overall, I'm of 2 minds, because I can't deny it's fun to see a motion version of a comic I love, but if there is no point to adapting it, and the filmmakers have nothing to actually say, why take the effort to make it? When it depicted wonderfully imaginative additions, I was almost convinced I was having fun, and if there was more of that, I definitely would have had fun. However, I only ended up being bored and wanting to read the comic. And it's not like I don't enjoy close adaptations of comic stories. A fantastic recent example is Invincible, and I absolutely adore Invincible. While it also is sometimes word for word, the original writers were able to recontextualize and reorient the same story, making necessary small changes that not only made it beyond entertaining, but made it a must-watch for anyone, diehard comic fan or not. Yet, when you look at Watchmen Part 1, I would say just read the comic. The graphic novel is made to perfectly utilize its 3x3 picture format. The art and dialogue all assist the reader in slowly feeding them all of the information they need. Each chapter gives a little more until the realization hits right before the big mystery is revealed. I don't know if it's the way that movies have to edit motion and transitions, filling in gaps left between the comic panels, but the murder mystery works a billion times better in text. Because the moment Veidt comes on screen, in the animated movie and the live action one, it is so impressively obvious that he is the bad guy. And when you put all of those grievances together, it all makes me consider if a studio is going to put their time into adapting a famous comic book run, don't just make the comic. Take inspiration, use the cool imagery and creative story, and most of all pay the artists who made it, but don't make 99% of it shot for shot the graphic novel. It's why the Disney reboots have more or less failed. They make a buttload of money, but they're a creative backstep. Because originality will always do better than a regurgitation of what we've seen before. They might have one or two scenes added and are slapped together with a modern day VFX sheen, but going out of your way to watch them is pointless when it's possible to just stay at home and experience the same story as it was originally created and intended. The one singular Disney remake that I didn't hate was Guy Ritchie's Aladdin, and that's only because they let Guy Ritchie do his thing. It was toned down for a younger audience, but you can still feel his hand. While they don't realize it most of the time, audiences crave something new, because I look at this animated adaptation of Watchmen and I wonder, who is watching this? Fans of the comic will go out of their way to see it, but they already know the reveals in the mystery and the story as a whole. Is anyone watching this without having read the comic or seen Snyder's movie? I sincerely doubt it, and because of that, no one is going to be surprised by anything that happens. They'll just sit there with the same dead expression, because that's what this is, lifeless. It's why I will never stop loving Damon Lindelof's HBO Watchmen miniseries. It was a sequel and told a completely new story. At every moment I was engaged because I wanted to know more about its new cast of characters or where the original cast had ended up. And the worst thing about all of this is that when I first heard about an animated Watchmen movie, I was initially ecstatic. Just imagine a creative art style like Spider-Verse, Wolfwalkers, or better yet, something completely new and unseen, but that's not at all what we got. If you agree and wonder if you'll tune in for part 2 whenever it's released, or enjoyed it, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.